And now, before we welcome Paul Hawken to the stage for his opening keynote, I would like to give you a sense of who's in the room. We have over 1,000 people from 58 countries, representing every continent except Antarctica. We have gathered to build the bridge to socially just and ecologically sustainable cities, and together over the next 3 days, we will explore what constitutes an ecocity. What are cities around the world doing? What is Vancouver doing? And how can we, as ecocity builders, coming from all walks of life, including the public and private sector, academia, and civil society, accelerate the transformation of cities to become ecocities? We will explore themes of climate action, circular economy, and informal solutions for sustainable development. The summit framework is organized around the international ecocity standards. They are developed through a whole systems approach to understanding how the global ecosystem self-organizes and how human social systems evolve to live in a way that is conducive to our long-term survival on Earth or not. We believe that following a path of inclusivity is foundational to achieving the ecocity objectives. As our mayor said, a city that works for everyone is what an ecocity is all about. As we enter the age of the Anthropocene, when human impacts are driving climate change, habitat destruction, and the 6th massive extinction of wildlife around the world, it is uncertain what the future holds. We are entering a state of global collapse, and it is important not to shy away from the hard issues we face and the complexity of the situation. To help us navigate this journey, I would now like to welcome Paul Hawken to the stage. Thank you.
That's the best introduction. Short, to the point. Hi, how are you? Good, that's what I hear. Like, I'm American, I'm not so formal as Canadians. I noticed you formed a whole community by spreading out as far as possible. I would just suggest for the next speakers during the 3 days, come together and model what we need to do, which is to come together as a people and be closer and get to know each other. And I'm going to start right now. I'm going to ask you all to stand up and talk to somebody you don't know or haven't met and tell them why you're here. Can you stand up and do that? Yeah, hi. Hi. See, okay, great. You can sit down now. Do you know? See? They've turned my counter on. I'm running out of time, so. But I just want to suggest to you, isn't that a beautiful sound? That's a sound. That's our sound. And just like we see beautiful sounds in the forest and hear them, this is a beautiful sound. And thank you so much. I want to thank Jenny for inviting me. I want to thank all the staff and the people at Ecocity World Summit for doing so. I want to honor Lieutenant Governor Janet Austin for really beautiful words and thoughtfulness. about her role and the connections she mentioned, as well as Elder Bob Baker, who has already left, but I really want to acknowledge him. I was going to have something later in my talk about Indigenous people, but it'll be for you as well. Also want to thank Mayor Stewart. Are you still here? I can't see so well, but maybe not. He's left, he's gone. Okay, that usually happens for me. I mean, the mayor's in this meeting. Well, they're busy people, I understand. He's got a cold. I'm not drinking out of his glass, but I'm going to. And President Kinloch from BCIT, and thank you so much. Just, I want to be a student. Really. I mean, can you imagine if schools were like that when I was growing up? I can't, and so forth. And I want to thank also Richard Register, who I was proximate in 1990 to the first Ecocity conference. I grew up in Berkeley. We called people who grew up at the university. My father taught their Berkeley brats. I was a Berkeley brat anyway, and I so appreciate what you've done. You see a word up there, drawdown. Drawdown means that first time on a year-to-year basis where greenhouse gases peak and go down. How'd that start? It started really in 2001 for me. And in 2001, the third assessment came out of the IPCC. Deborah Roberts is here somewhere, maybe not here tonight, but who's the chairperson of the co-chair of the second working group of the IPCC. And at that time, when it came out, it was more pessimistic than the second assessment, as each assessment has been, because it's based on consensus science, and there's no such thing as consensus science, which means it was suppressed by Venezuela, by Russia, by China, by Saudi Arabia. In other words, the work of scientists was tamped down in every single IPCC report. And furthermore, we have more data now. There's 3 billion data points behind the sixth assessment. It's the most comprehensive scientific endeavor ever achieved and undertaken by humankind. And for people who to say they don't believe the science is extraordinary. I want to ask you a question, two questions. One is, how many people are kind of freaked out now about climate? Just raise your hand. Okay, did anybody not raise their hand? That's what I want to know. Yeah, what do you know? Come to me later. I want to know what you know. Okay. And the other thing is, how many people here don't believe in climate science or global warming? Just raise your hand. Okay. Now, it wasn't meant to be a trick question, but it is. You all should have raised your hand. Science is not a belief system. It's evidentiary. And that idea that about believing or not believing in climate science came from basically Karl Rove when George Bush was president, to take the people who are talking about climate change and the climate crisis as a way of making them into believers. And the Republicans or the deniers were people who actually were rational. And in fact, they are the true believers because they believe that the Holocene period of climatic stability will extend for decades and centuries ahead in the future. And there's not a whit, a shred of scientific evidence to support that point of view. And so this comes back to language, which is really what I'm going to talk about most tonight, and is really about language, how we're talking to each other about climate change, I feel like has disengaged 98% of the people in the world. Not this room, but after 40 years of being in the public sphere, literally 98% of the people, they may be empathetic, they may be even literate, but they are not engaged. How did we do that? How did we create a movement where we are addressing the greatest crisis civilization has ever faced and probably will, and have that much of the world disengaged? And part of the way we do it is through language. In 2001, I looked at the language, and at that time, some of you may remember, out of Princeton came the Carbon Mitigation Project, and out of that was the famous 7 wedges, the 7, whether 25 gigaton wedges, and comprised of 15 solutions. And everybody was talking about it, saying, this is stabilization by 2050, it's coming out of Princeton. I mean, these people are so smart. and it must be good to go. And I looked at it as a journalist and thought, wow, I'm so glad, so grateful for this, and I read it. And then I read it again. I thought, this is unusual. What I'm saying about is that, first of all, everything in it was unaffordable. Had to be done by large multinational corporations spending down their balance sheet. So that was interesting. Second, there was nothing about consumption in there, about materialism, about overconsumption. Third, there was nothing about population. There was nothing in it about women. There was nothing in it about agency. Only corporations could be the agent, or you could drive less. There was one thing for individuals. You could drive less or put a solar panel on your roof. Left out of it was farmers, cities, towns, communities, companies, schools. I mean, the rest of the world was left out. And also, indigenous people were left out. And finally, is stabilization in 2050 at 550 ppm a goal? There's no such thing as stabilization at 550 parts per million of CO2. That's climate chaos. We're already there now. And this is not a linear system. It's going to get geometrically more pronounced in the years and decades to come. So what I wanted to do is basically, I went around saying to people, where do we stand? You know, I don't know where we stand. Do you? I mean, I felt like marooned, or like a sea, in the sense of like I really didn't know. And so I started to ask that question. And I asked at that time, can we just map, measure, and model the 100 most substantial, substantive solutions to reversing global warming? That last part being very important is, can we just name the goal? We're still not naming the goal. We're using verbs: mitigate, fight, tackle, combat. Those are not goals. The mayor, with due respect, said, we're going to fight so we can win this battle. There is no battle, and there's no one losing, so there's not a fight. Because as soon as you use that language, basically you are dividing the world. You're using male war and sports metaphors to talk about something that's exquisite and beautiful, which is the climate. What a gift it is. And climate change is not the problem. Human change is the problem. Climate always changes. And carbon is not the problem. We are the problem. This is a human problem. And in a way, because the science has been so extraordinary out of the IPCC, and it really is, by the way, impeccable, extraordinary science, that what's happened is we think, well, they must have the answer. They don't. That wasn't their mandate. The IPCC mandate was to study the impact, not the solutions. And if we're going to solve this, it's not going to be top-down, it's not going to be bottom-up, it's not going to be from the Conference of the Parties, it's not going to be from national governments. We wish we were old Denmark or British Columbia, but we're not. The world is different. It's going to come from what just happened now, a community of people together, talking everywhere in the world, and knowing that they're the ones who are going to make the difference. So this next video you're going to see was done by a 20-year-old. And I was doing a presentation for a corporation about climate changes here, and we were rehearsing at night, a room very much like this, with screens all around. There's big media presentation. We had our little slides. And then the woman who ran the media company said, oh, I have this intern, and he does this little video for you, and he wanted to know if you would want to use it. And I said, well, show it to us. And it was late at night in Atlanta, and we were going, what the heck was it? Was just like, yeah, that'll do. But I show it because he's 20 years old, and it's emblematic of what we hear from youth and Fridays for the Future and Greta Thunberg and the others. They don't carry the burden of the past. They don't carry the burden of having to fit in. They don't carry the burden of having to say things politely. Greta Thunberg apparently is incapable of lying. And isn't it interesting that truth has become a one-liner about the climate, which it has? Because we were kind of hearing language around it and this and that, and, but actually she just speaks the truth. And so did he in this video. And this is the video, is a little dire, but this is the one dire slide. And this is the Vostok ice core you see from the oxygen isotopes that measured both warming and CO2 levels for the last 400,000 years. And what we're told is that the ppm level in the atmosphere of CO2 is 415 ppm, which is true. What we're not told, but we should be, by NOAA, is that the actual level in greenhouse gases in CO2 equivalents, methane, nitrous oxide, SF6, CFCs, etc., is 495 ppm. That's what's happening in the atmosphere. And there's been nothing like this for 20 years. And that straight line up in that time scale has never happened, as far as we know scientifically, in the history of life on this planet, 3.5 billion years. It's never happened. So important to understand that yes, there's a climate emergency, but there's also a perceptual emergency, which is this is terra nova. This is the new Earth. This is an Earth that's never happened before. It's not like we're going to go back to something. We are in a territory that is vastly unknown. Anybody who says they think they know what's going to happen is in, I would like to hear them, so forth. But then, so if you understand that and you're an individual and then you Google what are the top solutions to global warming, and I did for years and years, I mean, it was hysterical. And I want to show you something. If you Google what are the top 10 badminton players in the world, in 0.25 seconds, you'll get it, okay? Here they are. Who knew? Nobody. But if you wanted to know, you could find out, right? But I, for years, did it for global warming. And here are the Scientific American and Union of Concerned Scientists and the top solutions, right? Well, yeah. They're like proverbs. Like, love your mother. That would be good too. I mean, and use a power strip in your home entertainment center. Well, for sure. First you have to get one, right? I mean, and so unless you had an IQ lower than room temperature, you see a list like this and you know it's inadequate to the task at hand, and it doesn't make people feel motivated, it makes them feel disempowered. Like, oh, I hope they do it. And the problem with all due respect to my gender, these white charismatic male vertebrates out there talking about climate change, is they're talking about energy, cars, Elon Musk, and energy and solar and wind and energy, as if we did all that, we would get a hall pass to the 22nd century. We're cool, no problem. There is a big problem with that. That's just absolutely not true. And those are absolutely crucial solutions. No question about it. It's a system that caused it. It's a system that's going to heal it. This idea that somehow we can go to these solar farms and wind turbines and electric cars and so forth, things that most people can't do, most people can't afford yet, and that's going to solve the problem, makes people feel like, well, I hope they do it. Who are they? It's not us. And again, it's like a separation. It's othering. So the book came out. What I did was, I didn't do it at all then. People in 2001, 2002, 2003 said, no, we don't do that, or you should do it, or we don't know how to do it. And I said, I don't know how to do it. In 2013, an article came out in Rolling Stone by Bill McKibben that said, global warming's terrifying new math. And basically what he did was burn the fossil fuel reserves, coal, gas, and oil in the world, in the balance sheets of oil, gas, and coal companies, and he just burned it, combusted it, and it was global warming's terrifying new math. And people came to me, this is funny to say this here in British Columbia, but in California they're saying, game over. I'm going to move to British Columbia. Really, they said, I'm going to get a farm out there in the valley, move my kids, like it's game over. And that's when I decided to do Drawdown. Not that I wouldn't like a Canadian passport myself, but I'm just saying the idea was that just go north, So these are some of the solutions, and as I said, we use only peer-reviewed science, had to be robust peer-reviewed science, extensive economic data, or we didn't model it. And we used the low medians when there's a spread in the science, very low learning rates. It's a very conservative book in terms of the solutions and their impact. And the number one solution came out to be refrigerant management. And I can't tell you how disappointed we all were. It's like, is that sexy? Yeah, refrigerant management. No, it's just like we thought, who's going to write the press release? Like, nobody picked it up, oh, Drawdown, refrigerant management, number one solution. But what surprised us, and I think everybody to this day, is that, when the Conference of the Parties was meeting before Paris, COP21, and we could begin to see, there was 228 of us, there was a small staff, 60 research fellows from around the world, 128 advisors, 60 outside scientific advisors to check our models. So there's 220 of us, and we could see at that time that we did not know what the top 10 solutions were. We were real clear about that. And if we had, before that, had written down, we would have put solar and wind and EVs just like everyone else. And at that time, I had staff and people at Paris, and I said, ask people what are the top 10 solutions, in any order, just write it down, And I dare say, no one in the world in 2015 knew what the top 10 solutions to reversing global warming were or are. No one. How could that happen? After being 40 years in the public sphere. And I'm not even saying ours are right, by the way. I'm just saying, how could we go this far without just having, we know the top 10 badminton players, come on, but we didn't know the top 10 solutions to addressing this civilizational crisis, So number 2 did make the list, wind turbines, and I'll just go these quickly. This is offshore. You combine off and onshore wind, and it becomes the number one solution. So they were right about that. And this is reduced food waste. And this surprised us, but not when we did the math. This does not include the methane emissions from landfilled food in the anaerobic environment. It would be number 1. This is number 4 solution, which is a plant-rich diet, which simply means in the West and Europe, and now more and more in parts of the world, reduce your protein intake to 50, 60 grams. In America, we eat 220 pounds of meat per person per year, putting aside how that meat is raised and so forth. That is so bad for our bodies. It's so bad for the body of the earth. And so it's reducing it to 50, 60 grams and shifting as much as possible to plant-based protein. And it's the number 4. This is number 5, tropical forest protection. This, as you'll see later, is really about honoring First Nations and First Peoples and Indigenous people in the world, because they actually are protecting most of the forests in the world that are still what we call primary forests. And then the rest of these solutions are just city solutions. I mean, this is urban solutions. There's walkable cities, Buenos Aires. Bike infrastructure, who's going to ride a bike if you're going to get scorched like a bug? So you need an infrastructure if you're going to have a biking community. Mass transit, net zero buildings. You're going to talk a lot about this during the conference. I'm not going to dwell on these. District heating, smart grids, building automation, retrofit, building retrofit. This is the Empire State Building. Green roofs. This is a green roof in Switzerland and that matched the ecosystem along the Rhine River, so that it created essentially a pollinator corridor, or extended a pollinator corridor. This is building with wood. There's 2 90-story wood buildings permitted now, one in Tokyo, one in London. The one in London uses no steel. or concrete. The one in Japan does use some steel. These buildings made of wood are more fireproof than steel and concrete buildings, high-rise. There's 50,000 high-rises that will go up in the next 30 years, and that's a big, big shift. Steel, concrete, 11, 12% of emissions. If you build out of wood, then the building becomes a sink and not a source. Okay, you're sequestering CO2 from wood, and this is a concept which, if we had more time, I'd talk about. But I want to talk about, forcing really goals that are so unreasonable that they actually break open possibility. And one of those goals should be cities should be like forests. They should be sinks of carbon. It's not reduction, not less. It's like, why not a city that is like a forest, which is it's sequestering carbon, water. There's sponge cities already in China. They're doing an amazing job. This is the top 20 solutions, and you can see 12 of them are land use. Again, surprise. Maybe was to us anyway. We just thought there'd be more technological on the top 20. And I don't want to, in a sense, say, well, the top 20 are the most important. They're just measured more in terms of impact, either sequestering carbon or in terms of avoided emissions. So we said when we came out with this book, it was the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, because no one had ever proposed a plan, so we had the subtitle all to ourselves. I do want to say this came out, the Exponential Road Map, on September 19th from the Potsdam Institute and WWF, and it's excellent. It's really excellent. It's about 36 solutions that can be accelerated and talks in sectors. I recommend it. You can download it from the internet. It's a 125-page PDF, and it's really well done. However, what did they leave out? Well, they left out her. They left out women again. And the number 6 solution is educating girls. I mean, how? Well, it's a pathway to family planning, because girls are taken out of school at 11, 12, 13, at puberty or pre-puberty, 145 million in the world. Those girls have an average of 5+ children. If they're supported to get a high school equivalent education, they have 2+ children. They know more, earn more, put those resources into fewer children. Those children repeat their mother's behavior. And this number 7 solution is actually family planning. There's 2 pathways to it. And if you combine those 2, that would be the number 1 solution to reversing global warming, is the empowerment of girls and women. And so you see this here. This is women's smallholders. You don't hear about them either. What you hear about is Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow, Industrial Ag. Somehow, if we don't have these mega corporations and we don't trust them with all their poisons and herbicides and their methodology, that we'll starve to death. Really? Don't think so. They produce about 28, 29% of the food in the world, if you can call it food. Hydrogenated fats, sugar, white flour, CAFOs, confined area feeding operations. Food, maybe. To me, they produce big pharma, which is stroke, heart disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. That's what they produce. Smallholders in the world, according to FAO, produce 71, 72% of the food in the world. 40% of them are women. Do the math. Women produce more food in the world than all big ag put together. Why don't we know that? It's a solution for us. If they get the same training, seeds, and support that men get, they outproduce them by 20%. I'm not sure why. I think nobody's quite sure why. They just do. Maybe they're more diligent. Who knows? And that is a huge, huge reduction in avoided deforestation alone. There's many other benefits from that as well. Solar, there's rooftop solar. We didn't use, an 8-kilowatt array in Atlanta on the 3-car garage to show it. We showed a woman in Lake Titicaca, and on a straw island in a straw hut, and she's smiling because she used kerosene to light up her hut at night so her girls could do their homework. And she's smiling because she's become a better mother. And what this slide shows and tries to demonstrate is that there's no such thing as a climate solution. These are solutions that benefit humanity. Period. Pure water, better educated children in this case, safer children, more biodiversity, better jobs, more prosperity, more biodiversity. Somehow we've got this thing like this, well, you have climate solutions. Well, yes, for sure. It's an emergency. We have to think about it that way. But they have so many cascading benefits for others. And I think that's lost in the conversation, as if there's climate solutions and then I have a business to run, like there's two different worlds there. There's only one world. And this is left out of Exponential Road Map. And left out, as I said early in the Princeton study, which is Indigenous Peoples Land Management. It's a Kayapo, the largest single landmass in the world managed by First Nations is the Kayapo. And look how much carbon they're sitting on. He's sitting on a rock there, but in their whole reserve, 849 gigatons. And look who's trying to burn it and get at it and so forth. Basically ranchers and farmers to do what? To grow soy. Why soy? 97% of all soybeans go to confined area feeding operations in the world to produce meat and pork for McDonald's and other fast food restaurants. At great harm to those animals, great harm to the environment. So when we talk about plant-rich diet, we're talking about supporting indigenous people as well. In other words, everything connects and relates to it. It's not like you can just silo it. It's one system. And so, tropical tree staple, again, this is Africa. Again, these have been cultivated, planted, and tended for centuries and millennia in Africa, from baobab and all these marula, all these different trees to produce food and medicine and so forth. And they're starting to be cut down for development. But look, it's the number 14 solution. And so the next book that's coming out from yours truly and a group of, a cast of thousands, but quite a few other people, is Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. And when I say ending the climate crisis, I don't mean completely, I mean extending the timeline. We have deadlineism, this idea, now it's 2030, 45% reduction in energy by 2030 is required for a 1.5C world, according to the SR15 report that came out from the IPCC last October. Okay, got it. And I don't doubt it, by the way, but the point being is that what we need to do is accelerate what we're doing and push out that deadline further, and to see that what we have done is actually pushed it out. So we have this morale builder, I'm going to say something that sounds strange because people talked about hope tonight, and I don't mean to be a killjoy, but I am an English major. And don't be hopeful. I'm sorry, that's useless. Absolutely useless. Hope is the mask of fear. No such thing of hope unless you're afraid of something. In indigenous languages, there's no word for hope. What do they know? A lot. There's 6,000 indigenous languages, and if you start to parse the language, there are local science. There are words for intention, for purpose, for heart. Lots of really beautiful words, but one of them isn't hope. What we need to be is absolutely fearless now. Not hopeful, but fearless and courageous in this, where we're going now. And that means to take risks, to take chances, to connect, to come together in ways we've never done before. And don't try to be safe. I don't care whether you're mayor or whoever you are. Stop being safe. The world is dramatically unsafe right now. And so what Regeneration is about is cities, for sure. There they are. And this is London, right? But there's something that is interesting about cities. This is the ocean, Doesn't look like London, but it looks like an interesting city. And first, it's about soil. Soil, why soil? Soil is the birth of life on this planet, on land. It is this where every time you breathe, thank a plant, okay? Every time. Or you can thank some phytoplankton too if you like to be Catholic small c and thank the whole group of them. But the point being is that from lichen into liverworts and mosses and so forth, over 1 billion years soil was created. And as soil was created, plants arose actually, the mosses and the liverworts and so forth, and then became more complex. The soil became more complex. More complexity arose from that complexity. Life creates the conditions that are conducive to life. That's what life does. So forth. And then the invertebrates came, and then pretty soon the vertebrates came to eat the invertebrates and so forth, and the birds and so forth. I mean, this is what happened on this planet. And those life-giving, life-sustaining, life-conducive forces create the climate we have today, and vice versa. That climate today created the conditions for life. It's that symbiosis. So the idea, and if you go like this, just right now, it sounds a little dorky, do it, if you want. What do you feel? What do you feel? That's the atmosphere. It's it. How can you fight it? I want to see somebody tackle it. Go ahead. We can do it over here. Stop using these words that make climate and the planet other. Because otherness is the disease and the thinking that causes the problem in the first place. That there's an other place we can throw our garbage or our plastic or the ocean or the air or people, or that people are different, they're other. It's racism, okay? People are different religions. This is Islamophobia. I mean, males have done it to women. That's called now the Me Too movement, but it's because of othering. And we can't talk about this as if it was other. It's us. So everything you don't see is the atmosphere. Right now. Everything in this room. So now you know everything we do, our breath right now, everything is affecting the atmosphere. So there is no leverage point, no Archimedean lever we can pull and say, oh, we're going to fix it. There's no it to fix. It's us. And we have to change how we relate to each other. And why is this here on Ecocity, regenerative agriculture? Because we're talking about renewable energy for cities. If it isn't renewable food, you won't be here. There won't be any cities. We have 60 harvests left in the United States. 60. That's it. That's the rate at which our topsoil is disappearing. So you can't be just renewable energy. This is renewable energy too, regenerative ag. But it's not just renewable food, but it's actually the most incredible carbon sink we have at hand. It says 1 trillion tons of CO2. That is a 0.5% increase in carbon in the 3.8 billion acres of farmland and 8 billion acres of grassland. Or it is from 1 to 3% carbon, soil organic carbon levels in just the farmland. Or you can mix and match it any way you want. It would take 40 years to do that, at least. But the thing so beautiful about this, we don't need a government. Farmers do this all on their own and so forth. But go outside soon, pick up a handful of soil. Please do it, just pick it up. It is the most complex ecosystem in the world in your hand at that moment. There is no ecosystem more complex than what you will be holding, right? The most complex technology, the most complex thing humans have ever created is a city. It's not. It's a technology. It's a 6,000-year-old technology. It's the internet 6,000 years ago. It is so complex and beautiful, extraordinary. So those are the two most complex things on the natural side and on the human side. And they have to co-evolve together. And so we have to specify, make sure our cities are specifying renewable food. And that is from farmers who are regenerating the earth. which sequesters carbon, but that's not why farmers do it. They do it to make the soil healthy. Healthier soil, healthier plants, healthier people, healthier animals, more biodiversity, cessation of poisoning the earth. We have this thing, this mantra in agriculture. It says, trust us, Monsanto. We have these herbicides, we kill things. We have pesticides, we kill things. Basically, if you kill enough life, we can make more life for you. I mean, any child can tell you that's just BS. How can you kill life to get more life? But that's what we've been doing in our farms around the world. And now it's time, as Gabe Brown said, as a farmer, he said, I used to wake up every morning to think about what I'm going to kill today. Now I wake up every morning to think of what I'm going to make live today. And that is what we have to do, because the fact is that we have liquidated this beautiful biological battery of Earth. We're liquidating it. We're calling it GDP. But what we're doing is stealing the future and patting ourselves on the back. And what we're talking about with regeneration is healing the future. And that too can be GDP. Why not? It's jobs, it's work, it's meaningful, it creates value, not disvalue, right? And that's what regenerative agriculture could do. And this is some of the techniques. I don't want to go into them. We don't have time. But just to give you a sense, this is a technology that's burgeoning right now, both with old techniques that have been restored or recovered or at least recognized, like the Montado or the Dehesa in Portugal and Spain, and things that are brand new in terms of quorum sensing, bacterial coding of seeds, etc. And this is oceans, and the Swiss Institute, the Federal Institute of Switzerland, the EHT out of the Crowther Lab, has identified 0.9 billion hectares of land using Google Maps that can be planted into forests that don't displace people or food, and it can sequester 750 billion gigatons of CO2 equivalent in the next 30 years. And these are some of the things I call forest wilding, not don't plant trees, plant forests. Please don't plant trees. They won't live, and it's not an ecosystem. Plant forests. That's what we need. And then this is oceans. And oceans have 50 times more carbon in them than the entire atmosphere. You increase that by 0.5%, and you've decreased basically the amount of carbon in the atmosphere by half. I mean, it's extraordinary. Nothing sequesters CO2 faster than kelp. 18 to 24 inches a day, 10,000 pounds, 10,000 kilograms every 3 months in this square, forget, 100 square meters, I forgot the number. So this is waiting for us to do it, because when you do this, look at the fish. This is exactly marine permaculture done by Dr. Brian Van Herzen. When you put down these frames and you create the conditions for kelp, you create, phytoalgae. I mean, you create zooplankton, you create microalgae, you create kelp, you create feeder fish, forage fish, you create basically mariculture, you create protein, and you restore and regenerate the life of the oceans. And to me, who do we work for? Who's our client? This is our client. These are two kids at Up in the Air School, the University of Colorado. They took Drawdown and cut it up into the pictures, and they act out the solutions. And they're acting out plant-rich diet. The one boy is a pea and the girl is a carrot. So they're peas and carrots. And so I think it's really, really critical that we really keep these people in mind. They are keeping us in mind and reminding us on Fridays quite often right now. But that's who we work for. And we work for these guys too, right? And we work for them, and we can restore life on Earth. We can reverse global warming. I think the problem has been that when we first apprehended the problem, we started to look at impacts. How are we making impact? Well, and everything was about reducing impact and less and less and less. Well, less bad is still bad, And so it's really important that we actually take that leap to regeneration, because the default mode of nature, of life, is regeneration. As soon as you stop burning, cutting, poisoning, scraping it, whatever it is, life regenerates. That's what it does. It doesn't know what else to do except to regenerate. So it's our ally, and it's about getting in alignment with those forces and so forth, and to see that 70% of the energy goes into cities, 70% of the food goes into the cities, 70% of everything comes out of the forest goes into the cities. So when we're talking about Ecocity, and Richard had it right the first time, it's not the political boundary of the city, which is necessary for voting and all that sort of stuff. There is no boundary to the city. No boundary at all. The atmosphere doesn't recognize one. It's one system. So an ecological city is a city that actually understands how to spec everything it does in such a way that the earth and inside the city, but everything becomes regenerated, that we reverse this 10,000-year liquidation of our heritage and of life on Earth. And lastly, I want to talk about, he wasn't one of our advisors, and for those who didn't see The Martian, he did come back, I just want to say. So I ruined it for you, but he did. This movie, which is based on a novel by Andy Weir, is not about Mars. It's a parable about us. It's a parable about Earth. And you think about it, what happened? First of all, his mates leave, he's banded on Mars, right? Well, that's about disconnection, how disconnected we've become, how we've disconnected ourselves from nature, how we've disconnected nature from itself, right? By killing off the extinction of absence, killing the pollinators, by getting rid of the beavers, getting rid of the wolves, etc. I mean, we've broken all these connections, and we're disconnected, and that's just vividly apparent right now, of course, in the United States. But I mean, it's true around the world. And so what does he do? He has a little dome, and basically, and he poops, and he grows potato in his poop, and I know you. Lunch or dinners later, but nevertheless. Okay, so what is he saying there? He's in a closed system, right? It's a closed system. This Earth is a closed system. This is the same thing. And then what happens in the movie? He blows it up. He loses his atmosphere, right? That's what we're doing. We're losing it in terms of climatic stability for a civilization. The atmosphere is fine in that sense, but not for civilization as we know it. Anyway, at the end of the movie, he gets back. And he's talking, he's Amanan's Gri, he's this, elder astronaut, the hero. And he's in a classroom with younger astronauts, wannabe astronauts, I guess, at a university, and basically he says, pay attention because this could save your life. When I was up there, did I think I was going to die? Absolutely. Space does not cooperate. You could say the atmosphere does not cooperate. It doesn't know what we think, believe, nothing. It's just the atmosphere doing its atmospheric thing beautifully, I might add. Beautifully. Extraordinary. And so then he says, listen up, because this could save your life. When you're up there, at some point, everything is going to go south on you. And you can either accept that, or you can go to work. You do the math. You solve a problem. You solve another problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. And that's what this is about. What are we doing? We're solving problems. And if we solve enough problems, we get to come home, starting from this home here, which is home. And home is community, which is why I want you to stand up and talk to each other. That's community, right? It's connection. Our home, Vancouver, in this case, for most of you, or many of you, or maybe not so many of you, but this is home, right? And we get to come home, because that's really what this is about. We've lost our home. We've become disconnected. And so the pathway to reversing global warming isn't just like, well, let's fix this and do that and so forth. It's about a transformation, because every problem is the solution in disguise. It wouldn't be a problem if it was not a solution. And the fact is that this is the most gnarly, super wicked problem we've ever comprehended. And therefore, it holds within it the most extraordinary and transformative solutions there are. And you have to ask yourself this: is climate change a curse or a blessing? I say it's a blessing, it's not a curse. You can think, is it happening to me? Am I a victim? Or is it happening for us? It's for us. It's feedback from a system. And anytime you ignore feedback, a system dies, right? Whether it's your body or anything else, right? And it's important to understand, that we say on this spaceship Earth, that we're the crew. We are not the crew. We're the passengers. Life is the crew. Living systems are the crew. Oceans are the crew. Forests, biodiversity, that's the crew. And as passengers, we have to live in alignment with the crew in order for us to continue our passage here. Thank you so much. Every time I lose my microphone. Hello. Every time I give a talk, I think, God, I forgot this, I forgot that. I don't know if many of you are speakers, you must have the same thing. Oh my God, I know I was going to say that. What I forgot to do is say thank you to you, to all of you, for what you do while you're here, what you're devoting your life to. I mean, it takes courage, but it takes brilliance, and it takes care, it takes compassion, it takes generosity. And that's why you're here, and that's why you've chosen to do what you do. And I feel so blessed to be in your presence, and I feel so grateful. People say to me, well, you're preaching to the choir. I go, maybe, but the choir sure is getting big. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And thank you again. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Paul Hawken, for those wonderful, insightful words. A great way to get us started. Maybe now we can start thinking about genuine development progress instead of GDP, about loving each other and recognizing there is no other. It is only us. And we are a part of this earth. It is not separate from us. It's a great way to start the Ecocity World Summit. Thank you again. And now I'd like to welcome all of you to join us for a reception next door in the exhibition hall. Let's party, and let's have 3 days of fantastic summit where we really get together, love each other, love the earth, and solve these problems. Thank you.